Okay, it talks about Abraham. Here we go. The invading groups permitted neither the peaceful pasturing of flocks nor the successful transaction of business. It is against this background that we must view the migrations of Abraham and of the early Hebrews. Tradition tells us that Abraham moved with his father, Terah, from the city of Ur in southern Mesopotamia, Ur of Chaldea, to Haran in the northern part of the country. Some writers associate the city of Ur, however, not with southern Mesopotamia, but with a different city of Ur found in northern Mesopotamia. Others believe that Abraham's home was in the city of Haran itself. Well, he was in Ur of Chaldea, and then he moved, and I think it was either Haran died there or something like that, and then he moved again, and then he moved because of God telling him, leave your land, gather up all your peoples, etc., and go to the land of Canaan, I'm giving you, etc. The Bible tells us that when Abraham sought a wife for his son Isaac, he sent Eliezer, his servant, to Haran, unto my country and to my kindred, Genesis 24:4. Nonetheless, the fact remains that Abraham chose to leave his childhood home and to live in the land of Canaan, again because God prompted him to. He had promised him this land of the Canaanites. It is possible that Abraham left Mesopotamia not only because of the political unrest. Yeah, apparently there's some dangers there as well. There's something really horrid going down there, and it's too dangerous, so they had to leave as well. Supposedly, this is in the last video we did, or one before that. It is possible that Abraham left Mesopotamia not only because of the political unrest in the Tigris-Euphrates River, there it is there, valley, but also because of his dissatisfaction with the religious teachings of his time. Okay. Maybe he didn't like the idea it was all pagan. Don't know. The belief may have begun to develop that if the God they worshipped were truly God, he could not be pictured like a man or a woman, nor could he have human needs. The thought may have begun to grow, moreover, that only one God should be worshipped. Abraham perhaps could no longer accept the official and highly organized polytheistic and anthropomorphic teachings about the gods and goddesses of his Mesopotamian world. They'd be like that Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian style. The Torah itself gives us one of the clearest examples of Abraham's situation. The origin of the story of the sacrifice of Isaac in Genesis 22 may be nothing less than a patriarchal protest against the sacrifices of human beings, which was practiced widely in the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley. Therefore, despite the superior culture of the cities of the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley, it may very well have been that Abraham and some of the early Hebrews chose to reject this culture with its unacceptable religious teachings. They may have preferred to live in the southern as well as the hill country of central Canaan, where they could be free not only to pursue in greater peace their business as a shepherd people, but also to develop their own ideas about God. What the exact nature of the religion which Abraham and other Hebrew groups practiced is not certain. Some scholars have suggested that originally in Mesopotamia, Abraham and many of the Hebrew worshipped a moon god called Sin. For example, they claim that the name of Laban, who the Torah tells us was the brother of Rebekah, comes from the same root as the Hebrew word for moon, Genesis 24:29. It is more probable that Abraham and the other Hebrew tribes, like many other people of the time, worshipped their gods under the name of El, and that there were many such Elim or gods. One such El was Shaddai, who was the god of the mountain. Therefore, in saying that Abraham and some of the early Hebrews chose to develop their own ideas of God, we must not assume that Abraham and his followers understood the idea of the one God as we understand it today. Okay. So, to a person's comment, their God was named El, which is the Canaanite pagan god. Okay. And here's the evidence here. El was Shaddai, okay, it was claimed as Shaddai, who was the god of the mountain. Okay. There were many such Elim, or gods, Elohim, right? Not too sure actually Elohim is the one, apparently. Not really sure. But here, Elim, gods. So, as Victor N. Alexander, the native-born Aramaic-speaking translator from Bet Narain, Mesopotamia, Syria, he translated the original ancient, very old Lishana Artika, the sacred scribal old tongue language, into English. has put on his website that was down, and we resurrected it, had put on there that these, or the later, or someone scripted it wrong. Right, when they eventually wrote it down, they scribed it wrong, and they used this El, which was this pagan god, the Canaanite, okay, as it says here, the god of the mountain. Because there was many such Elim, or gods. Yeah. Many other people of the time worshipped their gods under the name of El. It was scripted wrong, so it should be El, E-I-L, El Shaddai, right? El Elyon, and all that sort of stuff, right? Like that. Okay. Yeah, at that time, like he says here, they probably didn't understand the idea of the one God, one single God, or monotheistic God. Some scholars tell us that the patriarchs neither had a father-son relationship nor were worshippers of the same God. They point out that not one but many families may have become dissatisfied with the polytheistic and anthropomorphic religious environment of Mesopotamia, meaning that two or more gods, or human gods, because humans have needs, and maybe also mixing it up with, having a human figure with a eagle head or something like that, snake head, crocodile head, as the Egyptians had. Each of these families or clans, as a result, began to worship its own god, generally the god of its leader or patriarch, or founding father, right? This ancient practice has been called by some modern scholars practical monotheism or implicit monotheism. In time, these groups migrated to different parts of the land of Canaan, where they worshipped at the already established local shrines. So they went to these shrines that were already there. The various patriarchal gods took on the name of the gods of these respective holy places. It is interesting to point out, however, that only the names of the patriarchal gods were changed in the process of the migrations. The scholars tell us that the clans continued to worship their respective gods at the sanctuaries in Canaan in the same manner as they had previously in Mesopotamia. Later on, the same scholars tell us, even as the separate stories of the patriarchs were worked into one tradition, so the different one gods also were unified into one god. Yeah? They had these one gods, right? Pantheon of gods, one gods, who were also unified into one god. So they had many gods and one god. This tendency accounts for the fact that Yahweh is referred to by many different names in the Torah. What seems to have been unique, however, in the relationship between the patriarchs and the one God was not necessarily the fact that God was one, but the idea that the bond between this one God and the patriarchs was in the form of an agreement called a covenant, or in Hebrew a brit. There was a personal relationship between the patriarch and his gods. The patriarchs apparently treated the covenant relationship because they believed that their respective covenants held forth for them promise of the land inherited and the attainment of a posterity which would become a great nation, both of which were essential for the survival as semi-nomads. Genesis 15. This relationship was guarded zealously not only by the individual but also by the family connected with this God. The God of the patriarchs was both a personal God and a patron God of the clan. Okay, so maybe that's where the scripture might have come from there, way back. There are many gods, but there's only one true God. Right? Or maybe that's mean that there's many other idolatry gods, right? Yeah. Stone, wood, fake gods, right? But there's only one true God. It could mean that. Could have dual meaning. But it's sort of, maybe in Abraham's day, it might have meant that, that there were many gods, but there's only one God. The religion of the early Hebrews, however, was not free from what today is called primitive thinking. Despite any objections which the patriarchs may have had to the religions of Mesopotamia, they also had anthropomorphic aspects in their God concept. For example, the teraphim, which the Torah tells us Rachel stole from her father Laban, were nothing less than statue-like representations of his household gods. Genesis 31:30-40 to 34. Even more important, however, was the fact that these statues were also the symbols of a man's right to an inheritance.
This meaning of the teraphim became very clear in 1919 with the discovery of a series of clay tablets in the ancient city of Nuzi in Mesopotamia. The tablets tell that if a man has no male children, he may adopt his son-in-law, who becomes the heir, or the chief, the elder, right? And he gets his birthrights, and receives his property and household goods. Later, however, if a son is born, the son can inherit the family wealth, and it is he who receives the teraphim. So maybe in the case of Ishmael was Abraham's son outside his marriage, right, to his concubine, Hagar, right? So Isaac is born, and then he becomes the heir, okay, because he's the legitimate son of Abraham, right? And Ishmael was the one where, because Sarai couldn't, her womb was barren, she couldn't have children, so she actually said, go sleep with my concubine, my maid, right, and she'll bring you forth a child. So he did. Yeah, but he obviously he loved Ishmael as a son, and then when Sarah said, "I'll get rid of him," because Hagar was annoying her or giving her a hard time, so he did, and he felt really sad, right, heartbroken, according to that scripture. So maybe that Ishmael lost his heir, right? He lost his status of being the heir to Isaac, and lost all of his birthright to Isaac. So obviously when he gets ousted out with his mother, Hagar, he's basically left with nothing, right? And they barely had water, apparently, and all this sort of stuff. So Hagar started crying, because the poor boy was crying. He was probably thirsty and hungry. So that, it sounds like they were ousted into this desert region with nothing. Yeah, as a result of these discoveries, it has become quite obvious why it was of great importance for both Laban and Rachel to possess the teraphim. Laban wanted to protect any son who might be born to him. Rachel, on the other hand, wanted to protect herself and her husband Jacob in any eventuality. By possessing these teraphim, Rachel felt that both she and her husband not only would have a successful life under the protection of the God, but also would be the sole inheritors of Laban's property. At one time the question was raised among scholars whether Abraham, Isaac and Jacob were real persons. Although no document ever has been unearthed referring specifically to these three patriarchal ancestors, the weight of archaeological evidence is such today that no one questions the fact that at least the life and times described in the Genesis stories are reliable. Okay, and here's some information about a guy called Dr. Nelson Glueck, who describes his explorations in the Transjordan and the Negev as follows. Either the age of Abraham coincides with the period between the 21st and 19th centuries BC, or the entire saga dealing with the patriarch must be dismissed so far as its historical value is concerned from scientific consideration. We have been able to establish through archaeological exploration that period was preceded and followed respectively both in the Negev and in Transjordan by an extended break in the history of permanent sedentary agricultural civilization, and so forth.